Hi.
Oh gosh. Oof. Well, that's all the time we have, folks. Sorry. No. Welcome. Welcome. I will be your moderator, and I have a few things to say just to get us started. You are in the session, Bless Your Little Gothic Heart, which around my house we've been calling What's Love Goth to Do With It. Gothic literature is alive and well, ushering in overcast shadows and a mordant, sardonic take on the world's miseries. Its characters may be alive, but they are often not doing so well, on account of suffering from various afflictions. This is where the adjectives roomy and gangrenous really get their due. So horror, death, a soupçon of romance, fish monsters, dead mothers, minor kings, and wooden children. That is what we are promising you today. And we are joined by two of the greatest living writers in the game. Edward Carey is a novelist, visual artist, and playwright. His previous novels include Little, Alva and Irva, and Observatory Mansions, and an acclaimed series for young adults, the Ironmonger Trilogy. His writing for the stage includes an adaptation of Robert Coover's Pinocchio in Venice, a continuation of the Pinocchio story. His latest book is titled The Swallowed Man. Born in England, he now teaches at the University of Texas in Austin, where he lives with his wife, the author Elizabeth McCracken, and their family. Amber Sparks is the author of The Unfinished World, and her fiction and essays have appeared in American Short Fiction, Paris Review, Tin House, and Granta, and elsewhere. Her new story collection is titled, And I Do Not Forgive You, Stories and Other Revenges. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, daughter, and 2 cats. I hope you will consider purchasing Amber and Edward's books from our official partner for the San Antonio Book Festival, Nowhere Bookshop. I'm sure you've heard the many adversities that independent booksellers have faced during the pandemic, so I do hope you will support Nowhere and our wonderful author. There is a buy the book button on the festival site. Please find it, please use it, please tell your friends. 2 bits more, and then that's pretty much all you'll hear from me. You, the audience, may place questions for Amber and Edward in the Q&A box at any time during this event. A few are traditionally read out at the end, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll mix it up. And finally, I am Megan Labrise. I'm the editor-at-large of Kirkus Reviews. I host a weekly podcast called Fully Booked, and I live in Portland, Oregon with my wife and the ghost of our beloved dog, Mr. Rochester. So I mentioned Mr. Rochester as a way of leading into my first icebreaker question, which is, what's your favorite Gothic fiction? Who wants to go first? Amber, Edward, or fairy tale? Gothic fiction or fairy tale?
Well, I mean, I have to say, I'm teaching a class in Hans Christian Andersen at the moment, and getting lost into that man's craziness is one of the greatest joys I ever have as a teacher. And my favorite fairy tale, and it's quite damn Gothic, Megan, is his last tale, which is called Auntie Toothache, in which Andersen is dying as he writes it and suffering from terrible toothache, and he's haunted by this terrifying old nag who plagues the poor hero of the story and says, if you ever write anything else again, I will give you the biggest pain in your teeth that you'll scream forever. And he says, I'll never write anything ever again, and then dies. That's it. Very good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love Hans Christian Andersen. It's funny, I've actually just been reading the fairy tales to my daughter, who is quite Gothic. If anyone follows me on Twitter, she comes by naturally. And I've actually been reading her The Snow Queen, which is, of course, what Frozen is based on, but very loosely, but has all these just really delightful pieces in it, including the story of the little robber girl and her mother, who are just some of my favorite characters, and are just like wild and vicious and strange and dark. And the little robber girl sleeps with a knife under her pillow. So my daughter has decided she wants to be the little robber girl, which, you know, I don't know about that, but
Robber,
yeah.
pure beauty. She's fantastic, vicious as hell, and fantastic. And
Yeah.
I hope your daughter's ditched Frozen for Anderson.
Oh yeah, I hope so. She's definitely much more interested in the Anderson now.
Perfect start to what I'm sure will be the best event of the San Antonio Book Festival, I don't mind saying. I'm very happy to be here, honored, in fact, and delighted. And I would like us to continue forward, if we would, by offering some brief readings from your current work. Who shall go first?
I can. That's fun. I'll let Edward go second. So this one's just I just want to read very, very briefly. This seemed to fit the theme. So this is a wholly new and novel act with monsters. In late 1956, the classic circus died, and so did Susan Malone, the world's youngest lion tamer. At 6, she had been known as the laughing maid for taunting the lions, leaping lightly out of the way of their subsequent rage. At 10, she'd retired to Pensacola and taken possession of the defunct King Circus auctioned-off lions. She was bitten in the thigh and arm before being dragged off into the bushes and eaten for breakfast. In early days, circus described a wide variety of attractions, from a simple caged animal to a tent with aquatic acts, aerialists, equestrians, clowns, and bicycle races. Bands, ballets, even sea battles fought in wide, water-filled arenas. The beasts languished in cages, more portable zoos than animal acts. Joseph Handler's 18th century show, a wholly new and novel act with monsters as seen in their natural environs, terrifying and shocking, was, in fact, just a small barred wagon crowded with malnourished leopards illegally smuggled in from Madagascar. Then Isaac van Amberg stuck his arm and head into a cage of lions in 1862, and the crowd, as they say, went wild. Famous Ringling Brothers lion tamer Daniel Dakar died in 1892 after his arm was torn off, exactly 10 years to the day after his brother was killed. Both were mauled by the lions they worked with in what observers said were unprovoked attacks. 3 other family members were hurt or killed by the family business in the intervening years. One cousin told his local paper it was the price one paid to make bargains with the wild. Animals rarely honor such bargains, and humans even less. He had chosen to open a butcher's shop instead. Elephants and bears were introduced to circuses well after the big cats to significantly more fanfare. They were also more dangerous, their attacks more sensational. Some claimed, of course, that this was the whole point: revenge as story, attack as art form, a wholly new and novel act. In all instances, the animal's revenge was short-lived. Topsy was electrocuted, Mary hung from a crane, Dino and Barry were shot, Marvin was poisoned, and the King Circus lions were all quietly sold for their meat and bones. In some cases, the executions were public and publicized. In some cases, the deaths were kept quiet. In a few cases, the animals were allowed to live not because the trainers were soft-hearted, but because owners were thrifty and refused to buy new animals. In all cases, the animals were eventually pronounced destroyed, and in all cases, they probably were. Thomas McCarr, known as Missardi, was scalped and torn apart by 4 lions in front of a full house. Children suffered nightmares so severe they said they carried them in the blood like a disease. Their descendants claim they still dream of dreadful sounds and empty rings, blood spattered over the sawdust-covered floors.
Amazing. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to just read the small opening section from the beginning of The Swallowed Man, and this is Geppetto speaking from inside the belly of the sea beast. This is how it begins. I am writing this account in another man's book by candlelight inside the belly of a fish. I have been eaten. I have been eaten, yet I am living still. I have tried to get out. I have made many attempts, but I must conclude that it is not possible. I am trapped within an enormous creature and am slowly being digested. I have found a strange place to exist, a cave between life and death. It is an unhappy miracle. I am afraid of the dark. The dark is coming for me. I have candles, they are my small protection, and I have this purloined book that I shall slowly fill. Before the last candle dies, I'll tell my tale. I give you fair warning, I can boast you no battlefields. This is no murderer's story. There is no great romance. But before all this, back on land, I did an extraordinary thing, an impossible thing, and for that thing, in order that the world may be put back in balance, I am now paying a severe cost. I shall tell my terrible shame, my tale of the supernatural, though so devastatingly real. There we are. That begins.
Yes! Brilliant! Thank you. Thank you both. Magnificent readings. I'm really excited. For the benefit of anyone who is joining us lately, or maybe has not had a chance to read your fine books, I'm going to ask the same question to you both, starting with Amber, please. What is your book about, and under what circumstances did you write it?
This is my book. This is actually this is exciting. I actually just got the new cover. Yes, Edward has the old cover. This is the new paperback. It's called I Do Not Forgive You. And I always forget the and. And it is a collection of stories and other revenges. They're all stories that are told from a woman's point of view, or almost all of them. And most of them are some sort of revenge or another. So they were written in the last, I started writing them in 2016 after Trump was elected. And I had a very, very young daughter who was just a baby, and I was up very late at night when everyone else was sleeping. I needed to do something to blow off steam. So I started writing these little, I called them my revenges. And I was writing a novel, which still am. And at the time, I was just doing this kind of on the side. And at some point, I decided to collect them all into a book and see if the catharsis would be helpful to other people, because it had been helpful to me personally. And so that's how that came about.
Edward, what is your book about? Under what circumstances was it composed?
So it's called, my book is called The Swallowed Man, and briefly, it's the 2 years that Geppetto spends inside the belly of a monstrous sea creature. It's actually a shark in the Collodi original, and it's a whale, of course, in the Disney version. And this came about because I was writing. I was a writer in residence of a children's hospital in Florence, in Italy, and Carlo Collodi, who wrote Pinocchio, lived in Florence most of his life, and Pinocchio was all over the hospital. And they see many of the surgeons, the doctors, the nurses there see Pinocchio's journey to becoming a human, similar to the children's journey towards health. And there's something so important and exciting about the fairy tale of Pinocchio, about the child that doesn't fit in, that stands apart from everybody else. And I wrote about this for a couple of the Italian newspapers. And then the Carlo Collodi Foundation said, would you do an exhibition at the Parco di Pinocchio, the Pinocchio theme park in Collodi itself in Italy? I said, yes, of course I'll do it. Absolutely, I'd love to do it. And then I went, well, what am I going to do? I just had to do something about Pinocchio. The art needed to be about Pinocchio. And as I reread it, I suddenly thought, oh my God, what about Geppetto's story? Because he's stuck inside the sea beast, and Collodi says nothing about him. And I just suddenly thought, well, Pinocchio spends so much of the book going, what is a human? And I think that Geppetto is saying the same question, slightly differently, having been stuck inside the belly of a fish. Am I still a human? So that's how this happened. I wrote his journal and made art that I thought he would make.
Would you kindly transport that toward the camera?
This is Pinocchio that Geppetto makes inside missing his son. Finally, he's a brutal father. He's very different from the sweet, lame Swiss gentleman in the Walt Disney film. And he makes this bust out of ship's biscuit. So he basically sacrifices his food to make art. And I feel like in this time of COVID, how much have we gone just going, we have to make something to keep sane? And I've just kept thinking, actually, it's a rather severe form of self-isolation.
There are about 100,000 different directions to go off in, but let's go with crafts, people. Both of these books do feature them. And Amber, I'm going to turn to you. And I was wondering if you could briefly tell us a little bit about the subject of the story, The Eyes of St. Lucy.
Oh, sure.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. So it's funny and great that you mentioned that story because, one of the things I've not made a secret, I've been a fan of Edward's work for a long time, since I read Observatory Mansions.
I'm an Observatory Mansion fan too.
Excellent. And I really one of the things that I love is in that book and in so much of Edward's work is the obsession with craft and artistry and minutia and collecting and sort of the small things, people that are interested in small things. And because I have a very similar sort of obsession. And so I do write a lot, although I do not have Edward's artistic talent. I do write a lot in my books about artists because I just love artists and am a little bit obsessed that way. And so in The Eyes of St. Lucy, I wrote about a mother who makes dioramas. To sort of a suburban mother who is very repressed in many ways, and that's like the only way that she can sort of express herself is through the making of these dioramas, which is funny because now the novel that I'm writing is actually about a woman who makes is repressed and makes dollhouses. So apparently this is a whole theme, but yeah, I think I don't even know where I was going with that, but I've been very interested in a long time in sort of the idea of escape into miniature worlds and into the sort of detail that a lot of characters can be obsessed with, and how that in and of itself is sort of this fantasy world that allows you to sort of live forever or have immortality in this weird way. So,
Edward, I'm dying to hear your response to that.
I have to say, I'm going through Amber's incredible book. It was just like reading the ingredients to it to begin with. Reading the titles. It's just like this is the book I want to spend the rest of my life with. It's just pure joy. The stories are fantastic. We go from Lavoisier's wife, for God's sake, to ghosts, to St. Lucy's miniature models, and animals run amok, and monsters and ghosts and everything. It's just fabulous. And at the same time, it talks very directly about what it is to exist right now. So I have to say, I'm so thrilled to hear Amber saying anything about my stuff. So I'm over the moon. I think it's fantastic. Do you want me to answer a craft question or not? No.
I mean, if you want, we're all friends here now. It's been better than planned. Yeah. So
writing this book, I just sat in this chair, in this corner, in the dark, with the blinds down, and someone said, "If you were to do it again, would you do anything differently?" Yes. I'd get the hell out of here. I would go and see friends and go to theaters and travel and get the hell. I've been living in this corner. I have never left this corner for a whole year. I haven't moved from this particular corner. I'm actually nailed to this seat, and it's boring.
Amber, are you mobile?
What?
Barely.
Mobile. Are you in any way responsible for the beautiful arrangement behind you?
Oh no, oh not at all. No, it's this. I think it's what is it called? Saint Maid, Maide, and they make these beautiful arrangements of dried flowers, and I love them because I love dead things, and I also love not killing things, which I do with live plants. So I have lots and lots of dead flowers in my apartment.
Perfect. I have to say, your novel sounds amazing. I can't wait for it. The miniature, the dioramas, miniature. Oh God, come on, finish it. Have you finished it? Finish it.
No, I know it's so bad. I'm trying. I will.
So that aside, and now you have your orders, but to return to the Eyes of St. Lucy only for a moment, I have heard you describe this as kind of an inverse of a fairy tale, Amber. Is that ringing a bell? What do you mean by that?
I guess, I think it's funny actually that Hans Christian Andersen got brought up because, that was probably the first book that I read when I was small. I was very much brought up on fairy tales, and I had this Scottish aunt who used to send me all these great books, and she sent me this wonderful book that was Hans Christian Andersen, and I just devoured these fairy tales as soon as I could read, and so I sort of I approach a lot of my writing in I guess what would be called an inverse fairy tale way, where I'm sort of unpacking or taking apart the idea of somebody that has escaped into sort of another realm, a fantasy realm, a story, as it were. And I think St. Lucy's is very much that way, where you have this mother that is sort of, for better or for worse, sort of taken herself off into another realm, and caused some dire consequences while she's there, which I won't give away. But I think that there are consequences to that, right? There are consequences to living, to deciding that you're gonna, go off and live in the happy ever after, because there is no such thing. And a lot of times what took you there in the first place was maybe something that you need to come back and address. So, actually thinking about Geppetto too, and ending up in the whale very much in that way. So, yeah, I think that's, in that way, it's the inverse.
Edward, I will offer you two doors. One, door A is you may respond, or door B is I could ask you some strange question about fairy tales.
Well, I love this business about fairy tales and the idea of inverse fairy tales, or at least just, I teach fairy tales and I've been doing it for years, and it's something I love doing, and I keep thinking, well, why do you go back to those? What is it about them? And I feel like actually going to those old texts, they're very dark, and I feel like it's actually, they're the opposite of what Disney has made of them. It's as if when you pick up a volume of Grimm or something like that, it's as if you've cut off the head of a human form and dived inside the neck hole, and now you're swimming about in the insides. And they are lessons about how to survive. And what I love about those tales is it just gets back, crawls away from all all the rest of the boring stuff. Let's deal with monsters. Let's deal with death. Let's deal with the business of surviving. Let's deal with really real issues. And I have to say, my experience as a writer was sort of given a rebirth, because I got really lost at one point writing a novel that took me 15 years to write, and I couldn't get it right. And it was the one book that I've ever written about people that actually really existed. And I was like, what? I don't care about people who really existed. It's the fake ones that I like. And I got so lost in it. But I went, how do I reset myself? And one of the things that I did is I went, well, why are you writing? Why are you writing anyway? What do you think you care about writing about? What makes it so important? And my answer was, I went back to those books that meant more than anything to me as a kid, and those fairy tales and everything else. And I just went, that's what I want. I love the fact that Rumpelstiltskin can get so angry that he can tear himself in two. That is good. I like the fact that there are real monsters around, and of course they reflect on our actual everyday existence. So I will never write anything realistic. I don't care about it. And I'm with Amber. Let's get lost with all these strange creatures with the blood. Let's have blood everywhere. Let's actually, for me, exaggeration is essential. I'm sorry, everybody else that doesn't feel that way, but that's just how it is. I just, if there's something under the bed, let it come out.
Amber, I have a question. I'm interested in this now, and this might expand. So Edward, you're one of the first people I definitely don't get out enough at this point, but you're one of the first people I've ever heard say, that fairy tales are Gothic, but they are, but people don't say it a lot. Amber, would you go so far as to say Gothic novel is kind of fairy tale for adult? Or do you see them as having a different relationship?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say that fairy tales aren't for adults either. I think they are. So at least the non-sanitized versions certainly are. But I do think they have a lot of similarities. Yeah. There's just so much. A lot of times the Gothic novel sort of goes into the happy ever after and then goes beyond it, right? I mean, you have, what you really find out about Mr. Rochester, right? And sort of the reveal there. And I think a lot about, I was reading my daughter, I'm reading my daughter like all these fairy tales, so this is just, keeps coming back. Right. But it's funny because I was reading my daughter Sleeping Beauty, and the like original Sleeping Beauty, and I had forgotten that in the original Sleeping Beauty, it doesn't end with Sleeping Beauty being woken up and everything's great and she marries the prince. The end. It actually goes on to this whole second part where she has to deal with, she gives birth to 2 children, and she has to deal with his mother-in-law, and his mother-in-law is an ogre that wants to eat her children. And so then she has to hide the children, and they have to trick the ogre and kill his mother-in-law, which also was a whole other thing to unpack. But the mother-in-law story. But yeah, it's and I feel like a lot of fairy tales, if you actually go past the sort of Disney version, are very much about, they're a warning, right? And the warning extends beyond just the happy ever after and sort of into the consequences of happy ever after, which I think is very much a lot of times what the Gothic novel ends up being about. It's, be careful what you wish for, be careful of the perfect, the appearance of the perfect, because there's always going to be something darker behind it that you have to be aware of. So yeah.
I love that. I think that's absolutely right. And of course, Jane Eyre is a version of Beauty and the Beast. It's exactly Beauty and the Beast. And so we get all the fairy tales come out, and so much of great literature, particularly Victorian literature, we can say is, Gothic literature is influenced by fairy tales. Charles Dickens talked about that as a child he was deeply in love with Snow White, and you go, well, Charles Dickens, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. But if you look at so many of his beautiful stories, if you look at Miss Havisham from Great Expectations, who is about the greatest character ever written, she's just Sleeping Beauty gone bonkers. She's the same character. She's just the weirdest possible version of it. And I think that's so exciting. I just think, I find that liberating. And that's the sort of thing that you read about those characters, that you just fall in love with the idea of strangeness and exaggeration. But, they're not strange just for their own sake. They're talking very much about what it is to be a human being. They're deeply serious about grief and survival and what it means to be put down, what it means to stand out from the crowd. And I do think they're kind of, they're lessons on how to live. And I think, the Gothic literature took them and went wild with it. You look at, E.T.A. Hoffmann and the Sandman, and all that craziness is just pure joy. And then you see something like, oh my God, the Tin Drum. The Tin Drum, when I read the Tin Drum when I was like 20 years old, that was the moment I said, oh, screw theatre. I still love theatre enormously, but I want to write a novel. My God, you can do that? And you have Decliner Oscar? And he's straight out of Grimm. And Günter Grass would have said the same thing. And it's just that gloriousness of that pure energy. And yeah, I love it. I mean, yeah, I couldn't have anything else. I would. The new book I'm trying to write is filled with ghosts, and I'm so happy to see ghosts play such a great part in Amber's book.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Also, Amber, did I perceive a whiff of Wuthering Heights in this collection? Is there like a...
Oh yeah. Well, that's awesome that you said that, because St. Lucy's is a very, very, very loose homage to Wuthering Heights, and no one has actually ever said that to me. So I'm so excited. It's very subtle, but no, I'm like obsessed with Wuthering Heights, and I love it so much. For exactly these reasons, right? It's so Gothic. It's so over the top. I love Kathy's ghost, banging on the window, summoning Heathcliff to his death. So, yeah, it's that is definitely in there, and in a lot of things I write, actually, which is weird, but.
And how did you feel about the Kate Bush song, Wuthering Heights?
Oh,
yay or nay?
I love it. Yes. No. Yes.
At this point in our conversation, I want to remind everybody in the audience that you feel free, please, to enter any questions you may have for our illustrious authors into the Q&A. I will be happy to recite them and credit you. Maybe let's, we promised the blurb, like the little come on for this event, promised dark, like we'd go dark. I don't know if I am going to be up to the challenge of that, of swerving us into darkness, but let's try a little bit. Can we talk about cruelty, intimate cruelties in Gothic literature and fairy tales? It seems highly personal. I mean, we're talking about human nature, right? And one thing that people are prone to do is unkind things to one another. In these stories, you might see a child beaten or a husband poisoned. I mean, in Gothic novels, there are people shut away in rooms parts of the house you'll never even get to see. And in fairy tales, you can get plopped into a pot of soup. Is it essential to the genre?
Yeah, shall I jump in now? I mean, yeah, I think get as dark as you possibly can. I just think the cruelty, I mean, it exists in the world. There's no doubt about it. If you look at you can look at fairy tales, and it's talking about very, very real hardships on people starving to death. And being beaten and destroyed by society. So yeah, absolutely. And also, there is a joy in the horror. and a fascination with it. You know, what is more terrifying than a mother who wants to eat their children, for example? And yet, you know, you can see, for example, Maurice Sendak talking about writing Where the Wild Things Are. And he says, the wild things are my parents my family who escaped the Holocaust. And they were still speaking well, I think they were speaking in Polish. They were saying, and they were saying, we'll eat you up. You're so delicious. And that horror then comes into it. But from that, you're 2 steps away from Goya and Saturn devouring his children. It's all there, but it's all true. These monsters in fairy tales, in Gothic fiction, are with us now. For Christ's sake, look at the orange moron, excuse me, who's just been moved out of the large white mansion. And look at the pale, blonde, fluffy moron who rules my sceptered isles. You know, we have strange creatures everywhere. But you're talking about the danger and horror. But look, those idiots cause us to go through this, particularly the orange idiot, cause us to go through absolute true misery. So there's no exaggeration in this darkness. It's absolutely there. You want to get dark? I just got dark, Megan. There you go.
You know, it's so funny and actually serendipitous, because I was reading this morning, and I don't know, Edward, if you read this book, but Beautiful Darkness. It's Velman and Carey. It's a graphic novel. You would love it. And I love all of Carey's work, but it's this retelling. Well, it's not even a retelling. It's sort of like about all these fairy tales that escape out of the mind of a girl who has died. And all the fairy tales and story characters have nowhere to go, so they have to like escape into the forest and find their way. And it's extremely dark. I mean, that's a dark beginning, but it gets even darker, and it deals with like animals and what does it mean to be human, and sort of the inherent cruelty of people and selfishness of people to each other. And what does it mean to live in a society? And it's actually like, it's a really short read, but it's super dark and super good and creepy. And I was like, oh my God, I was actually rereading it for a class, but then I was thinking, God, it's perfect for this conversation, because you know, I was also reading in Edward's book, like the part where, you know, he's talking about what it means to be human. And he's talking to a piece of wood. Hello, tree. You know, once I was a human. And there's sort of this great idea throughout that book, and I think throughout a lot of what I write about, you know, transmogrification, and what does it mean to be an animal, and what does it mean to be a human, and what are sort of the values and of, you know, and what does it mean to be an inanimate object, and how does that morality sort of fit within the universe. Sorry, I'm going off, but basically that comes back to this sense that it is a very dark thing, because you know, I think there is a lot of inherent cruelty, obviously, in human history, in human society, and the history of humanity is largely you know, one of cruelty as well as one of great kindness. And so anytime you're telling sort of a fairy tale, or you're telling a story that has these sort of fairy tale elements or fantasy elements to it, I think it does. It is a ridiculous story if it doesn't have this darkness to it, because or I guess not ridiculous, but then it's a story for very, very young children, because you know, it doesn't have the ring of truth to it. So I think you know, anytime it's a mirror thing, right? And anytime you have these elements of great light and joy and happiness, you've also got the darkest facets of humanity sitting right alongside of them. So I think that's my favorite kind of literature anyway.
Listen, those two answers were among the most brilliant answers of the whole shebang, and I love them. And Amber, if I seem distracted, I'm going to pull back the curtain for everyone. You two are the most brilliant authors to have, and I'm the least brilliant moderator, because I cannot for the life of me figure out where these little ping ping notification sounds are coming from. I was trying to turn them off, but I wasn't doing it SABF, so that is what happened. But what those noises, which you might continue to hear, mean is we have some questions from the audience, and I see no reason to hold off any longer. The first one I'm seeing is from Maricela Chavez. Thank you for this question. What's the last news story you read and couldn't help but see it through a fairy tale or Gothic story lens, and why? That's a cool question.
It's hard because I read so many stories. Let's see.
Can I jump in, Amber? If you,
yes, please.
I've just finished reading Golem Girl by Riva Lera, and it's such an amazing book. And she talks about her life as she's someone who suffered from spina bifida throughout her life, and her account of it and her way of talking about fairy tales and darkness in a way to describe herself as someone who was seen as a sort of mannequin, as a golem, as in the golem of Prague, is something that is so beautiful and so gorgeous and honest and brave, it's such a beautiful book. I beg people to read it.
I would say probably Helen Oyeyeme is one of my favorite writers, contemporary writers, and of course everything she writes is brilliant, and has sort of a fairy tale background basis, fabulous basis to it. But her new book Pieces, actually, I just finished, and is really, really good. I won't spoil it, but there's, like all her books, there is a fairy tale framework there, and a darkness there, that is kind of exactly what we're talking about here. So.
Okay, I've got another question. This one is for you, Amber, specifically, from Cynthia de Leon. Have you ever had St. Lucy's Eye pie from New Orleans? P.S. Love Kate Bush.
So I have not, and I would love to know where I can get this, because so New Orleans is actually if I was a rich person, which I'm not because I write books, but if I were, I would have like a second home in New Orleans, because I am in love with that city. My husband and I have visited it many times whenever we can. So I want to go and eat that pie now very much.
Cynthia, please feel free to tell us in the comments what the pie includes or tastes like. I'm fascinated as well. Good name for a pie. From Gladys, do you have any underrated Gothic literature you would recommend reading? A great work that doesn't end up on the top 10.
Well, one thing I would beg people to read myself is fairy tales that were written in the 1500s, but we've only recently got them translated because they were written in Sicilian, in Neapolitan dialect, are the fairy tales of Giambattista Bassile, the Tale of Tales, which are wonderful, very strange, very dark, and written with a voice and with a panache that I would say out Nabokov's Nabokov.
Ooh.
There's many that I would recommend. I would say Isaac Dinesen. For folks who are not familiar with her, Karen Blixen is her real name. Was a Danish writer, but wrote under the name of Isaac Dinesen, and she has several collections of stories that are definitely like very Gothic and very very storytelling-y, I would say, and very dark and very interesting, and I highly recommend her.
Amy has asked for a check-in on the titles of your books again, and I have them right here. So it's The Swallowed Man is Edward's book, and Amber's is And I Do Not Forgive You. And then we've got another one here from Elisa. Thank you. Based on this misery of Gothic, how do you both, as writers, balance the darkness so that your writing is engaging and enjoyable without being bleak?
Go ahead.
Go on, you.
I would just, for me, I humor, I think, is that for me, because I definitely, you know, I don't always succeed, but I definitely love Black humor and find most things actually quite funny that are very dark, and not everything, not Trump, so yeah, I just try to have a lot of humor to balance it out in my book, and hopefully, you know, not make things quite so, if they're depressing, they're at least funny, I hope.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Absolutely, dark humor is essential. It is that thing about Charles Dickens that always has that wonderful sense of humor, and the Brontes as well. Well, at least Charlotte certainly. For me, that exaggeration in itself is so exciting. To see something huge and strange move, you have to have an innocent to witness it as a balance, so that those innocents are like coat hangers on which the strangeness is put, so that they are the dark, strange humps or whatever else that goes on top of it, so that you can see humanity in all its different shapes and sizes. But the trouble is, we're preached about what humanity is supposed to look like. We're all such different shapes and sizes. We're all bloody Gothic. Let's not call Gothic extraordinary. We're all Gothic, for Christ's sake. Let's cut to the chase here, can we? And not, you know, we're not just talking about, oh, it's really agony to write a novel about, I don't know, middle-aged divorce or something. There's so much that's much more exciting. Let's actually, you know, let's look at humanity. And we are creatures, we're animals. We get old, we die. Sorry, it's gonna happen. So let's see the excitement in that. How do you distill life into a wonderful story? And it's that wonderful line from Jeanette Winterson in The Passion. I'm telling you stories. Trust me. And you just think, yes, that's it. I just think, I'm sorry, I can't be realistic, to hell with it. And I just think, you know, we aren't realistic. Listen, we've been shut in a bloody, personally, a bungalow in Texas, for Christ's sake, for a year. That was never supposed to happen. Who let that happen? It's nonsense.
You've actually set me up with a real good hand here, Edward. As I turn to Amber and I say, Amber, I have heard you make a distinction between being a writer and being a storyteller, and bringing yourself into alignment more with the latter. What's that distinction to you, and why do you choose storyteller?
Yeah, it's funny, because that's actually something that I got from Denison, from Isaac Denison. You know, she always said that about herself when people would say she was a writer. And, you know, it might be because like Edward, I actually come from the theater originally, and wasn't, you know, always a writer first and foremost. I was sort of a performer. But, you know, for me, of course I'm a writer. I write things down. You know, craft is important. The sentence is important. But ultimately, I think the stories that I'm telling, and this sort of like oral tradition that I'm hopefully following in of passing on these stories and saying, like Edward just said, you know, listen to me, trust me. I'm going to tell you a story now, and that to me is the most exciting thing about getting to sit down and write a book and have somebody else read that book, is the idea that I am becoming this vessel in which, you know, the story sort of distills itself and turns into something else. It's sort of alchemist, you know, that the magic happens in, and then I get to pass that on to somebody else, and they do what they will with it. So I think to me, I'm less interested in having somebody look at my work as on a sentence level, although, you know, that's nice and I appreciate that. But I'm more interested in hearing somebody who reads it and gets something about, you know, what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to live in this world? What does it mean? What are the stories that we've been telling ourselves for years, and what do those mean to us, to me? That's what's interesting to me as a writer.
Edward, does that resonate?
Well, I think that joy of telling stories is such an important thing, and that business of going, you know, what are we in the end, but our stories. And I think that that distillation is something that is important. I mean, I love the fact that I didn't know this, but it makes perfect sense. Amber saying that she came from the theatre, and God, I miss the theatre more than anything, and that pain to see the theatrical world back again, but that need to tell stories and to exaggerate. Yes, storyteller. I don't know. I get very confused. I teach in a university. I'm the least qualified professor in the whole of the University of Texas at Austin. I just have a bit, but I'm sort of, I'm not academic, but I just desperately, I also just want to go, okay, come on. Where are the stories, where are the tales? I'm babbling now, but I would sit down with a fairy tale and get lost in that, and I feel my whole imagination then is restarted. And that for me is an important thing. And you can get tales from anywhere in the globe, from China, from India, from Africa, and suddenly they sum up humanity in about 3 sentences. I could never do that. And you look at those tales and you go, see, that to me is an astounding thing.
Well, you know, we've done it. We flew, and we're landing now. And this has been the true joy of my pandemic. Edward, Amber, I can't thank you enough for letting me be a fly on the wall for this marvelous conversation. I want to thank our audience for joining us today to listen in. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. And especially thank you if you have chosen to migrate to the Buy the Book button and support these wonderful authors and the sponsor, our bookseller sponsor of the San Antonio Book Festival. We really appreciate it. I think that there's no grand exits in the era of Zoom, right? But I'm going to hit the button now. Thank you all once again. Amber, Edward, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Megan, so much.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you guys.
We'll be together soon.
Yes.